Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today, it's part 2 of our Evil Dead gigantic review. We are, of course, talking spooky stuff because it's Halloween. We just had our Evil Dead episode part 1. If you haven't heard it, go listen. And it's one of our most popular episodes, so thank you guys so much.
Well,
I really appreciate it.
But part 1 will be covering, if you haven't listened to it, go to it, because that will be covering the original 3 movies and the musical.
And today we kind of talk about the rest of the franchise, kind of what happens when they go, okay, it's time to bring Evil Dead back, because, at the end of Army of Darkness, that was kind of it for...
That was kind of it, and that was like 90s, and then the musical was like 2003 when that first started, and kind of nothing outside of maybe the occasional video game of varying quality, to put it softly.
And then we get an Evil Dead remake. And what I want to say is that this Evil Dead remake, as we're going to go through all of it, spawns the rest of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
it's like the resurgence point.
It's the resurgence point, is that Evil Dead gets its remake. They go from there and they're like, okay. Now, this is kind of spoilers, but not really, because this is an old 2013 movie. But basically, they tease Ash Williams at the end of this movie, kind of implying that this is still all part of the canon and just a different story of Evil Dead. And it was heavily touted that they were working on another sequel to this. So Evil Dead would have an Evil Dead 2, and then which is very confusing, but I'm sure they would have gone for some other title.
Laughs in Halloween.
And they wanted to do a movie after that where Ash Williams is crossing over with Mia from Evil Dead, kind of finishing off the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
Now, that really fell apart. It really it just wasn't happening. Evil Dead did really well. This remake, it did surprisingly well. But it did not like spawn this insane reaction, but did spawn enough for them to take those ideas of the 2 movies after this and make them Ash versus the Evil Dead and Evil Dead Rise. So everything we're talking about here is due to this first remake movie. Is that they all spawn from this moment of being like, okay, Sam Raimi's like, yeah, I've always thought it would be great if we could remake Evil Dead in a modern context with great filmmakers, and Bruce Campbell was like, oh, they're gonna mess up Ash Williams, and that's how we get Ash Williams back for Ash versus Evil Dead. I think is him being understanding that, Bruce Campbell understanding that feeling of being like, no, they're gonna mess up my character, and then he's like, wait, I am that character. I'm alive. I can do that character, and then we basically get that in Ash versus the Evil Dead. Now, and then we get the brand new from this year, Evil Dead Rise, which was supposed to be the Evil Dead sequel to that we get here, which is you feel that. I feel like I just finished it this morning, and so I'm coming off it very fresh, and I feel that Evil Dead Rise feels like a direct sequel to Evil Dead more than it does anything else, like, even though it heavily references the other movies, is very much that. So if you guys are hopping into this episode, you're probably hopping into this episode for 2 reasons. Either you love Evil Dead and you just want to hear some Evil Dead stuff, or you're like, hey, I watched Evil Dead 1 and 2, and I've seen parts of Army of Darkness, or you've seen all of Army of Darkness, and you were like, what happens afterward? This is what we're talking about, everything that is the rest of the franchise here. We'll also talk a little bit about...
and also that question of, like, is it worth it without, like, Sam Raimi being as directly involved?
Which he is. He is involved. It's just not as the director, you know,
Yeah.
like, but he is producing or executive producing on all of these projects. So it's not, you know, out there and out of his control, but it is, you know, it's not him on the reins. Now, and I think that's really cool because we get an interesting mix here. You have basically like the prodigy for Evil Dead. You got like Sam Raimi being like, this man, he's the horror. He's the horror, like the new horror, like youth. Let him direct my Evil Dead remake.
Fede Alvarez, who would later
Yes.
go on to direct Don't Breathe,
and Don't
which
Breathe
is also
too.
very good. Which is not very good.
and then Ash vs. Evil Dead is really fun because Sam Raimi's working on it, but even more so, Ivan Raimi, his brother, works on it more, who's always been involved in the original Evil Dead. So it's really fun to see him kind of like take the reins, at least in writing for and some episode directing, but mostly in writing for a lot of these episodes of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, which I think is quite interesting. And then you have quite the interesting director in Evil Dead Rises. How do you say his name? Lee Cronin. Because I feel like it's not somebody that I would have, you know, pointed to as being like, this guy needs to direct the next Evil Dead movie. But I did watch Hole in the Ground the other day, which is his movie before this, 2019. I don't know if you've seen it, Deshaun.
I haven't. No.
It's on Netflix. Totally worth. Short review. Totally worth the watch. Creepy, weird. Absolutely worth it. So I was hopeful going into this. I was like, this guy did I like this. I like A Hole in the Ground. It's weird. It's different. So let me go into Evil Dead Rise. And I think that that's kind of interesting too. Is that we have you have like the prodigy who only had a short film before Evil Dead. And then you have the brother who's been there the whole time doing Ash vs. Evil Dead. And then you have this guy who they were definitely like, studio was like, so he did this other horror movie. You know, like, they're like, but he wrote this. So, you know, like, that's kind of the more interesting part here is this is the first one out of all of these that is very creator focused, I would feel like, is that the other ones have a lot of people working on it, but this guy is writing and directing Evil Dead Rise, and I think that's kind of interesting because it's very Sam Raimi, you know, like where he's writing and directing, you know, so I'm like, okay, I like that vibe, you know, like I definitely enjoy that. Now, Deshaun, what are your feelings on Evil Dead? Because it starts off with a fucking bang, doesn't it? With the fucking scene where they burn the girl, starts off hard.
You and I watched this for the first time. We didn't catch it in theaters, but we did watch it after the fact. Yes. I remember we watched it. I think Harry was there too. And he was just like such a total like horror baby. He's just like, oh God, this is so, dude, this is so weird. Oh, why were you even watching this? This is so hardcore.
To be fair, this movie's banned in like Ukraine for being too violent, and like several other European countries for just being very violent, and got an NC-17 rating no matter how hard they tried to lower the rating. So to be fair, this is a gory movie, but
it is.
Yeah, but to be but then you go and watch Ash vs. Evil Dead, and you're like, this ain't gory enough. Let's pump this baby up. Like, it's like I was coming off of Ash vs. Evil Dead to rewatch Evil Dead, and I was like, not enough.
It's funny.
I'm like, send it further.
That's actually how I felt about Rise in a lot of places.
Yeah,
where it's just like it doesn't. It's just like, you know, this is good, but you know, it ain't going as hard as the remake did,
dude. And like, so we'll get into it, but I feel like that was my problem, is that I came from Ash vs. the Evil Dead, which really leans into like everything that is what these demons are doing, you know, like what they're up to, what kind of demons they're dealing with, all the lore. But then Evil Dead Rise is just like, is kind of like, yo, there was a third volume, then the first two volumes you guys were fucking with, and this one combines some people. Oh, that's fun. Then you're just like, Sure, but like it's
But
also one of those things that you come from Ash vs. the Evil Dead, where they were sending it with all the like classic wide-eyed demons, and I was kind of like, this is fucking right, you know, like this is fucking metal as shit, you know, like, and you're just like, all right, but we'll get into it.
So
further.
Evil Dead
Evil Dead
remake, as we discussed in the last episode, when it comes to horror franchises, I'm always going to prefer something that's a little straighter than something that has more of a comedic leaning. So, like, even though Evil Dead 2 is objectively the better movie, I tend to like the first one more, just because it's played straight.
As I said last episode, Evil Dead 2 is probably my favorite horror movie, you know, next to The Thing. You know, it's hard for me. It's like, oh, they fight each other. But it's definitely, like, in a top 10, you know, for me.
So when it comes to horror, I like it when it's straight. So, like, the remake appeals to me more because it is played even straighter than the original movie is.
Yeah.
It is very bleak, very just like straightforward, dark. I love the premise that it's them taking their friend who's in recovery as like a detox. I'm like, okay, that's a much better incentive to be like, this is why we need to be in this weird secluded cabin in the middle of nowhere, so we have no access to everything because we're trying to help her go through this, as opposed to teenagers being like, oh, it's a great spot. She's like, really? This stinky old fucking cabin?
You're just like, guys, there's an Airbnb anywhere else, you know, like, like, so it doesn't work in like modern times. So I do like that change, and I like that Evil Dead remake keeps you guessing. As a fan of Evil Dead, you come in and you know Evil Dead. This is not. It tries to play you on knowing you know Evil Dead.
Yeah,
you know, like, and I feel like that's definitely a huge point up for this movie. I would say my feelings on this movie are that it is effective, very gory, and it's almost meta in its way that it plays you the entire time.
Yeah, and also in like the sense of just like, especially with the plans to do like a sequel to this and then cross it over with the Ash stuff. Even before you know that was a thing, or like a thing they were trying, the whole like, is this a straight up retelling of the movie? These are all different characters with different names, but also the Oldsmobile is there, and like Mia's like sitting on it. So it's like, is that just straight up Ash's car left behind?
I know. One thing I will say after, you know, rewatching all of these Evil Dead properties this for these episodes, the Delta is a beautiful car. It's played as a joke, you know, often that he loves the Delta, but like, the Delta's a gorgeous car. I'll say it right now. And so when it's one of those things that it's not even like in Evil Dead Rise, you're kind of just like, why not? You know, like, I mean, they made the chainsaw Delta colored, which I thought was a nice touch. I thought that was like, oh, look, it's Delta colored. But like, I was still like, where the fuck's the Delta? You could have just had it in the background somewhere, you know, like you could have just had.
He always finds a way to like sneak it in all of his movies. Like, it's in Multiverse of Madness.
Yes.
It's it would be anachronistic, so the car itself isn't in Oz and the Great and Powerful, but he found a way to like sneak like the engine in it.
And you're just like, Jesus Christ. He's fucking wild for that. But it's one of those things that after watching Ash vs. the Evil Dead, you're like, I love that car. It's fucking awesome. It's wild. And they do, and I feel like just seeing it in Evil Dead makes you be like, okay. You're like, okay. And I do like, like you're saying, I do like that they're playing you being like, we said this is a remake, but nobody's Ash here, you know, like, and then the first girl starts to chop off her arm and you're like, they haven't really said that girl's name. Is she Ash? You know, like, you're sitting there being like, which one is Ash? You know, like,
yeah. I know you haven't seen it.
And I feel like that's where it's playing you, you know, like,
I know you haven't seen it, but like Curse of Chucky goes through a similar thing where like the series was kind of dormant after Seed because Seed was garbage. And And when they were advertising Curse, people were questioning, just like, what are we doing here? Is this a midquel? Is this a soft reboot? Are we ignoring Bride and Seed? What are we doing? Is this a remake, or is this like a secret soft reboot or something? And it turns out it's a secret soft reboot. Oh, it's after everything. We were just being coy about it. And I kind of like that approach.
Yes, and
it's in the
like
same way that
they
like,
do that here too.
You can make a prequel work if people don't know it's a prequel, if it's a secret prequel.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like that's, and I feel like, or you do something like Prey, where you're just like, we're doing something completely fucking different, you know, like where it does not touch anything else, because that's the thing about doing a prequel like the Star Wars prequels is that the drama is in how do we get to the situation we started in Star Wars, and you know,
which is tough to do.
It's tough to do, you know,
especially if you're it's easier to do if you're trying to follow new characters that you don't know where they might end up by the end of this.
Yeah.
But if you're following younger versions of people we've already established, it's hard to introduce stakes when you know like where this is going to go at the end.
Yes, exactly. Because you know that person can't die. It's one of those things that they do in horror movies that to play with you is that they establish who's going to be a final girl and then they'll kill them off. Because they know you watch a ton of movies and you know who the final girl is and she's safe. You know, like there's no way they'll kill that person, you know, like is what you think. And then they'll play you to try to get you to be like, oh, okay, all right. And I feel like this goes even a step further than that, where it's not, there's no, it's like the final girl twist is even more crazy here because
they kind of posit like Mia's brother is like, that's the leading man.
Yeah, they're like, this is
guy.
Our Ash, you know, like, look, he's wearing like the simple colors, he's got the shotgun, he's our Ash, you know, like is basically what they're doing, and that's what you're thinking the whole time is you're like slightly disappointed in him in a way, you know, like where you're just kind of like, yes, Ash is an idiot, but like he is always trying to be there for people, you know, like, and you're kind of like, this David character isn't really Ash-like, but his sister's obviously, Mia is obviously, in my head I'm watching it going, Mia is the sister from the original movie and she's in the basement like the original movie, and then for them to be like, no, the sister is, you know, Cheryl is actually the hero here. You're like, oh, I like this. Like, I like this a lot.
And it's also kind of cool that like the character or like the function of that character, both in the original and the remake, which is just to be a victim, especially with the tree thing, gets to like fight back, is cool because they sort of, and they do and they don't do the tree rape in the remake.
Okay, yeah, I did want to talk about that because
it was going to come up.
We talked about it last episode where both Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi don't like the original tree rape scene. They don't like it. You know, like they think it's too much, and they wish they hadn't done it. You know, we talked about that. But it's, you know, it is what it is. It's committed to film now. But this is kind of a reinvention of it. But is it any less violating and disturbing? No, it is not. You know,
I think it's in certain ways it's worse.
Yeah, in a lot, and that's what I was gonna say. Is like in some ways, just the going inside and then it stops is worse. Like it's somehow just so much more horror. It's almost classic horror in a lot of ways of like the evil spirit entering you, but the way it's violating her makes it so much worse, you know, like, and it's definitely one of those things that this movie was already trying to freak you out, you know, like by being like, oh yeah, the violence is coming, you know, like, and then it's
also the way the practical effects are sold, because as weird and disturbing as the scene is in the original film, effects wise, it's almost comical now.
Yes, yeah, but
But
it's
here
fun,
you're like,
but...
that's
that looks
good.
Way
too real. That looks like an actual creature.
If there's anything I can give to Evil Dead, is that the effects look incredible. It's an insane like use of practical effects, and I love it. Especially there's I know why they use digital blood in Ash vs. the Evil Dead, but it's one of those things where there's a lot of like bad CGI in that show, and you're just like, I know why we're using blood, because so we can do more cool things, but like, I don't like the digital blood. Like, I hate it. Even for the intro, it's like, it's fun. The intro's fun, but I hate the digital blood. I just hate it. Like,
God, when is like digital blood like ever looked good?
It's never looked good. It never looks right. That's my problem with it. It's just it never looks right, guys. Like, I've seen anytime any movie uses it, I see it. It's and I immediately go, ugh, like, instead of like, and not in a like, oh wow, I'm disgusted by the blood. It's like yeah, that looks bad. Like, what the fuck were they thinking?
Even beyond the tree thing, like, there are just moments in here that still just stick out to me. And you know me. We always make the joke of whether I'm broken or everyone else are just a bunch of wimps. There's still stuff in here that like gets to me, like the tree thing or the fucking
and the needle
the
to
eye,
the eye, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I immediately, when they started to do the, so I know this is jumping around, but when they in Evil Dead Rise, when they started to do the tattoo thing to the eye and they didn't do it, I immediately was like, pussies! Oh, I was like, what the fuck was that? Evil Dead was doing this? Like, what is this backwards tracking where we have this absolutely disgusting fucking movie that blows you away, to Evil Dead Rise, which is slightly slowing it down. They eventually ramp it up. It does an impressive job of ramping up, but I will say that I immediately was like, what the fuck was that? I was like, that the Evil Dead scene where he stabs him in the eye is one of the most disturbing things to me. It just, I immediately, like, when I see that scene, I go, oh, Jesus, fuck. Like, it's just like an immediate, like, visceral reaction to seeing that happen, like.
Yeah, I can
like,
take the, like, contact to the eye. What really gets me is when he pulls it out.
Yeah. Oh, God, dude. And it's just kind of, like, loose the rest of the time. You're like, fuck me, man. Oh, God. And then the staple gun through the hands, and then... It's just I gotta say, it's brutal.
Constantly brutal. The effects are good, and Jane Levy just carries this whole fucking movie on her shoulders. There's a reason why when Fede Alvarez did Don't Breathe, he made her the lead.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that you see her doing these things, and you're like, oh, that's why, Sam Raimi, as executive producer, was like, yes, she's my Ash Williams, like, you can see it, like, that she's got these acting skills that Bruce Campbell's got, like that, where he can sell these ridiculous scenes. It's why I think Ash vs. the Evil Dead is so damn effective as a show, is that Bruce Campbell is somehow able to sell all of these ridiculous fucking things happening, like, and I think that's why Mia or Jane Levy is so good here, is she's able to sell all this fucking ridiculous shit, like, and you're just like, holy crap, like, I think she does a great job here, and I'm impressed. Like,
demonstrates a lot of range, and it's one of those things where, like, I have a friend who really loves Evil Dead Remake. That's probably her favorite in the whole series, just because of how hardcore it is. Wow. And it's always the one that comes up.
I feel like that could probably be an argument here. Yeah. Is that Evil Dead, even though to me, in a lot of ways, it's brutal, it's disgusting, it goes hardcore, but it, like, doesn't impress just this one little bit, like, maybe it's because the pacing, I don't feel like it moves as fast as it probably should. I don't know.
See that.
It's something about it that doesn't make me be like, yeah, that was fun. That like I am impressed by it, and I like the movie, but I'm never like, oh fuck, that's even better than Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. You know, in my mind.
Is that it's what I think the problem is that it's covering the exact same material because it's going into it with a remake idea. So for as much as it tries to like subvert your expectations and kind of turn everything on its head, which it does, it still has the novelty of just like, oh, there's all this cool stuff here, but we're still covering stuff we already know.
Yes, I agree, and I think
like
that's maybe it.
You can't separate those two because it's so intrinsically like linked.
I think that's probably it. Is that I like how far they go with the gore. I don't like how far they go with the demons. You know, like because they kind of try to bring the demons down to more realistic zombie-like attacks in Evil Dead, and maybe that's why it feels more brutal, but it also is what I think and I feel like they still captured this here in the Evil Dead, is that the reason why Evil Dead as a franchise is so different than a zombie or other demons things is that they really lean into that these demons are like evil and wanting to fuck with you and wanting to, you know, like, and get like it's not exactly to kill you, it's to make it worse, you know, like, and that's the fun of the franchise. I feel like is that it's always to make it worse and just to like, and it keeps getting,
and I feel like that's just
worse.
Like, and I feel like that's just the trade-off of like grounding the remake so much.
Yes.
And like playing it so straight that like you lose something in translation when you do it.
And I feel like that's kind of my issue in tone flop with Evil Dead Rise. Is that, and I feel like that's the main problem with Evil Dead Rise. I know I'm skipping around, but the tonal flop going on all over, which you could say for all the Evil Deads, I guess, but Evil Dead Rise, it feels more significant, where they're trying to be as realistic and dark as Evil Dead, this remake, but they also want to have the ridiculousness of Evil Dead 2 or Ash versus Evil Dead for the end of it. And and I feel like, even though I love how much it devolves at the end, there's some weird like tonal shit going on in Evil Dead Rise that
there's like the willingness but not like the prowess to pull it off.
I think
because it's not an easy hat trick to like balance those two different tones like that. You get a Sam Raimi in there because he likes horror, but also he grew up a huge Three Stooges guy. So there's like that understanding of like that balance. And people have said like the way you approach scares in horror is not unlike the way you pace out comedy. Like they have like a similar approach.
Yeah, because it you know, you do as much as you set up a joke, you set up a kill, you set up a scare, you know, like, and same things for you know, like you do things in threes for jokes, like you keep bringing it back, you do it again in scares, you know, like they do in even here with Evil Dead. They keep going into the basement for 3 times to really fucking ramp up, like, we shouldn't keep going into this fucking terrible spot, you know, like it keeps going bad, you know.
The reason I brought up like a friend loving the Evil Dead remake so much is one of the things she brought up is that she loves Mia specifically as a character.
It's true.
And wish that Mia had like carried on if we got a direct sequel, because she's like up there for her in terms of like horror heroines, and like that's completely fair. That
to me, that's completely fair. She's, in my mind, one of the best final girls. Like, absolutely. It's so wild and cool. Like, her being resurrected at the end and it actually working is just as surprising as when in Evil Dead 2 when Ash somehow gets the demon out of him. You know, like when he it's like, it's just as surprising and as effective as that moment. And I think that's what that, you know, like they're trying to do there. And I think that that's why it's so effective. But I'm with you. I feel like people can have, if they were going to rank these movies, which we should save till the end for our own rankings, but they could, throw this Evil Dead remake at the top of the list. I don't blame them. For people who have more modern sensibilities, don't like the slapstick, and just want a character study instead of Ash Williams. I can see why this can be a favorite.
And you could also argue of it like being the hardest of the films in terms of gore. So if you just want that specifically, you'll probably go to this one a lot.
Well, to be fair, if we're talking gore, nobody's beating these fuckers. Nobody is beating these seasons of Ash versus Evil Dead. Nothing can.
But Ash vs. Evil Dead also still has the comedic leaning.
Yes.
So if you want like the gore, but also the serious tone to like really get under your skin, it's there.
I think to be fair, Sam Raimi being like, I believe Evil Dead would be a great like modern remake. I feel like he's exactly right. Is that and they accomplished it here. Is that I feel like that's the thing that even if I'm slightly underwhelmed, and it's only slightly. I say that with because I still enjoy this movie a lot. I had a great time rewatching it. It's great. But it's one of those things that the straightforward tone is very much like the original movie. But you don't have Bruce Campbell there, which I feel like can help lower the cheese for people. And of course the stop motion effects, a lot of modern audience people don't love stop motion, and they're wrong. But
I mean, to be fair, I respect and love stop motion. It always sticks out like a sore thumb.
Oh yeah.
Like, look, The Thing, which we both love, the worst effect in that is anytime they use stop motion.
I still love it. I still love those effects so much, and they look so creepy.
That one shot where the tentacle grabs the fucking detonator sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, there's a reason they were supposed to do more, and there's a reason they pulled back on it, because like it just doesn't match anything else.
Yes, I agree, and I feel like it's. I feel like that was the fun for Sam Raimi with Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 is like he got to try stop motion in Evil Dead, and then Evil Dead 2 he actually gets to do some like very serious high budget stop motion, and then you have Army of Darkness, which is like half stop motion.
Yeah, I also think in Evil Dead 2 the transformation with Henrietta where like the long neck comes out. Like, that stuff where it fits, but you need to be able to do it well so it doesn't feel like it's sticking out like, that's obviously not really there. Like, I just for kicks, before I just wanted to put something on before I went to bed, I watched Beetlejuice again last night, and I always forget how good the Beetlejuice, like, snake looks in that one sequence.
Insane.
Every time.
I rewatched it this month, too, and I was like, damn. It looks so good, you're like that's some impressive shit, like you're just like, god damn. There's a lot of that movie where you're just like, Tim Burton, you were on some other shit with this movie. Like the set design is some crazy.
I could totally get why fucking no one understood what that movie was when they were making it. Well, mostly studio wise anyway. There's just like what they had no idea. They're like, what the fuck even is this?
Yeah, because when you start watching it, it's kind of like, what the fuck am I watching?
It's an odd one.
Because it kind of just throws you in, Beetlejuice. But besides the point, Evil Dead, I think, is a very impressive movie. I think it can be your absolutely... I wouldn't even blame you if you were like, this is the best Evil Dead. I do think it's missing I think it's missing the absolute blinding pace of Evil Dead 2 for it to be up there for me. I think Evil Dead 2 has one of the best pacings of any movie fucking anywhere. And maybe that's why I'm judging the pacing on all the sequels so much, is that I'm like, well, Sam Raimi fucking made the perfect paced movie. What the fuck is, like, come on, move along. Even though I don't think they lose a lot of time in this movie. I think they do kind of move along. But I will say the other thing they are missing, and is very, and you brought it up there, is some Kandar demon transformations. They do it in every other Evil Dead. I feel like it's a little bit missing here. I know they're going for just like, oh no, these are like they're evil and they're dead and you can't fucking kill them.
Well, there are no transformations in the first movie.
No, no transfer. No, there isn't. You're right.
Just the Deadites.
No,
that's it.
Just the edit. You're right. So it's just one of those things that maybe I've been spoiled by Ash vs. the Evil Dead. I feel like.
Either that or like it's because it's focusing, other than like a few like winks, it's really focusing on like first movie. That's our Bible. That's what we're going by.
Yeah.
And of course, because Evil Dead 2 is the most popular one, or anything beyond that, you'd be like, yeah, but I want more Evil Dead 2 in this. You could still sprinkle some more stuff from that in. It's just like, well, they're laser focused on really just recreating the first one.
Yes.
Or like, we have the book, but we don't really get into like the extended Kandarian demon stuff until the second one.
Yeah, it's true. That's very true. It's just an evil book in the first one, kind of, like, so I like that we go deeper and deeper and keep going deeper with the franchise. And that's what I meant by tonal flip also in Evil Dead Rise, is that they go from being like, no, we're doing the zombies again like Evil Dead, and then they're like, oh yeah, we can do a Kandarian demon. Fine. No, don't worry about it. We'll just throw that in there. And it made me happy, but it also made me be like, where did this fucking came out of fucking nowhere? Like, you guys didn't even build this up. Like, you guys are just like, oh yeah, if you flip deeper in the book, we can combine people. That's what we're gonna do. And you're like, I love it, but also, where did it come from? Like, you're like, where did you go with this? But I'm sorry, I'm riled up about Rise, but
yeah, because it's like fresher on your mind.
It's fresh on my mind, but I'm gonna.
In summation, like the remake is a good time. It's easy to see why people would like pick it as the favorite. I like to rewatch it a lot. It's the one that probably actually grosses me out the most because it's not playing it for laughs.
Reminding you to gross Deshaun out is fucking huge. You gotta really fucking send it for Deshaun to be like, ooh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm pretty desensitized.
But that fucking dude, when he blocks all the shots with the nails into the hand, and then the crowbar goes to the
crowbar
hand.
Splits his hand. Yeah.
Oh, like, oh man, that fucked me up so bad, and it still fucks me up, and it mostly because I then think about Robin getting the shit beat out of him with a crowbar, and you're like, yeah, they don't show.
They don't go into just
could be
how. Yeah.
You're like, hitting somebody with a crowbar is not just a doink. It's not hitting somebody with a shovel. It's a bladed fucking weapon. Like, you're just
it's so fucking funny that like Death in the Family, I think, was like the first Batman comic I ever read.
Really? Deshaun was like, yes.
Yeah, it was just the animated series and like other cartoons and stuff like that. And then like one day at my local library, when because my elementary school was literally like across the street from the public library, so we would go over. I'm like, oh look, Batman, Death in the Family. Oh my god, Robin died. And then I read that.
Oh my god. That's
so I'm pretty sure that was the first. So starting off with some dark shit.
Dark shit there. Now we'll get into, right, so after Evil Dead, we already said it, they were thinking, we're going to make a sequel to this, and then we're going to make a combined movie that's like kind of, Ash Williams will come back and he'll fight with Mia or whoever's left.
Or they'll team up or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever. And which I thought would be fucking awesome. And I remember them talking about that for years, and then they scrapped it. And the thing about scrapping it is that it doesn't stop Sam Raimi. Like that the studio walking away does not stop this man. And he kept working and eventually got it picked up by Starz, the television, which Starz is owned by which movie studio? It's some big movie studio that owns.
I don't know.
I'll have to look it up later. I can't remember off the top of my brains. But it's basically one of those things that that we kind of lost. Lionsgate, thank you. Is that you kind of lost a a big thing there. You know, in your little fan brain, you lost a really cool possibility of a sequel to the Evil Dead remake and a combined movie. Guys, don't worry about it. Because this is way better. This shit is fire, my guy. This shit. No, I'm serious. Deshaun gave me. So I haven't seen Ash vs. Evil Dead. Deshaun's been talking up to me forever.
Yeah, I watched it all as it aired. Like, I was just like, this show is dope. No one's watching it. It's going to get canceled. And that's what happened.
That's what happened. And you can definitely feel that every season. They kind of have this feeling at the end of every season of being like, yeah, we're definitely getting canceled. Better just fucking send it at the end of this season. You know,
well,
and
we
just
did
like,
start
right.
off well. Like, it was renewed for a season 2 before season 1 even premiered.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we knew we were good for at least 2. But then once
2.
season 3 came out, because they did the same thing. Right when season 2 came out, they said, like, season 3. And then season 3 came out. They were quiet. I'm like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I gotta say, this is way more fun, way better, and just absolutely insane than it has any right to be. You know, like, so it's first off, it's just literally Ash being a fucking idiot. That's the fucking story, guys. That's the fucking plot. Ash reads the Necronomicon again after 30 fucking years and releases Evil Dead. That's how it starts again. But the thing is, that's what he did the first 2 times, so you're kind of like, meh. You're kind of like, that's
that
sure.
first episode like perfectly establishes just like, this is the tone we're going for. We're playing a little straighter. It's not full Army of Darkness. We're back to a little bit of Evil Dead 2. But, you know, it's still wry. It's very sarcastic. We're definitely playing into, like, the Sam Raimi approach to Ash that the studio kind of, like, sanded the edges off a little bit with Army of Darkness, is that Ash is a fucking idiot. We love him, but he's a dope.
Ash is a himbo. Yeah, Ash is a himbo, but he's, you know, like... Or I saw a comedian say it the other day, hotism, you know, like when they're hot but a little autistic, you know, like you're just like, that's fair enough. Ash is so great. They kind of establish it right from the first season. Don't think, like, you know, when they're like, you know, ask questions, shoot, you know, lots of other places will be like, shoot first, ask questions later, or ask questions, shoot. Ash figures out pretty early in the season, don't think, just do. And that's pretty much the fucking show.
Yeah.
Don't think, just do. And that's the show, because it just does that in such a great way, where it is full of fan service. It builds on what was established in the originals 3 movies. It has so much fun with Deadites, insane amount of fun with Deadites, and then just kind of builds the lore up in a way you really wanted.
It's the Evil Dead like sequels you wanted post Army of Darkness. Like those 3 seasons, there you go. That's Evil Dead 4, 5, and 6.
Guys, not even joking, he's right. Like, I will say one thing that I think brings down this show is that they definitely go back to the cabin a little too fucking much.
Yeah,
but I love when they go back to the cabin. It's one of those things that you're like, you went back to the cabin too much, but every time you do, it's a good time. So I'm kind of upset, but not really. You know, like
at least when they go back to the grounds in the 3rd season, like the cabin is gone, they don't pull that back.
But at least they do something in the woods there.
Yeah.
But like it felt like we didn't need to do that, but at the same time, I'm cool with it. It's one of those things that the Kandarian dagger never is useful. That's like the point of the Kandarian dagger, is that Sam Raimi's putting it in there for the people to feel like, I have a weapon, but it's not really a fucking weapon. But in this show, we finally get why the Kandarian dagger is fucking badass as shit, and why it's actually a fucking weapon. Like, it actually can kill things. And like, I really love that part of this show. It kind of like encapsulates this show. It's like, no, the Kandarian dagger in Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, even in the Evil Dead Evil Dead Rise, which they replace Kandarian Dagger with Staffen, is just useless. It doesn't actually kill anything. It just makes you feel good. And I always love that about it, is that they're like, whoa, a mystical dagger, and it doesn't do shit. And you're just like, nope, chainsaws and shotguns. That's what does it, like, and then I love that this show goes, no. The Kandarian dagger is the only thing that can kill Kandarian demons. And you're like, oh. And then they play with that a lot, and I really enjoy that. That's the kind of vibe this show's doing the whole time, is just being like, so that thing that was useless in the original movies, we're using it heavy here, and you're like, cool, all right. I will say, at first, you're gonna watch the show and you're gonna be like, okay, who the fuck is Paco and Kelly?
Pablo.
It's kind of one of those. Pablo, sorry, I did Nash Williams there. I called him Paco, but Pablo and Kelly are. You're kind of like, why are they here? At first, like, you're kind of like, they're obviously the S-Mart employees that are tagging along, and then
it's not S-Mart, it's Value Mart now.
Value Mart. Right,
an interesting thing about Ash vs. Evil Dead is that they. Again, it always we do this. This happens every single time. As we talked about in the last episode, where Evil Dead 2 couldn't use the footage from Evil Dead 1, so they just remade it. Army of Darkness couldn't use the footage from either, so they just remade it again. Here, okay, we can use footage from Evil Dead 1 and 2, but we can't use anything from Army of Darkness. So we can reference that it happened, but we have to be coy about it.
But not even coy. What are you talking about coy about it? He literally the whole plot in the second season is them being like, oh yeah, I went back in time, might as well keep going back in time.
Yeah, but that's also how Evil Dead 2 ends.
Yeah, right? You're just like, okay, so
you can say I went,
and it is in 2. You're right. It's true. They're not.
You can say like I went to the Middle Ages, because he goes to the Middle Ages at the end of 2.
So they're not breaking anything there. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah, but they can't say S-Mart specifically. But also, it's also been like years.
It looks so close, though. So
it's also really been like years, so it's not too outside the realm of possibility to be like, oh, S-Mart isn't a thing anymore. It's not a chain that exists, or it got bought out by something. It got
bought up. It's Value Mart.
In the same way that like Kmart is barely around anymore.
Right? Yeah. No. And seriously, I don't want to go into a Kmart. So it's one of those things. If I see one, I ain't going in. It was always the fluorescent lights. They made it feel green and dingy,
Yeah.
I never liked going into Kmart's. I was like, the vibe is bad. Let me get the fuck out of here. But I know what you're saying, where like Ames are gone. We're just like, what the fuck?
But either way, Ames? They couldn't directly pull from Army of Darkness or use footage from it, so they only lucked out in that. Evil Dead 2 has that cliffhanger ending, so they can still refer to the fact that, like, yeah, I went back in time. That's a whole other thing. We don't need to really get into it.
I thought that's so much fun.
But the show also has the musical approach to it, where they just kind of combine the first 2 movies. They're just like, don't think about it too hard. Both happened. It's safe to assume that Evil Dead 1 happened as usual, and we just kind of picked up. As soon as the camera hits Ash, we pick up into Evil Dead 2, and we just combine them. Don't think about it.
Don't think about it. And but they also visually signify it, which I thought was really cool. So in season 2, that they go back to Ash's hometown, and they are they go to his house, and they literally see her door. They see her door, and they do this moment where it kind of flashes back and forth, and he looks at it like he's trying to remember. And I like that moment because it's kind of like a very like, don't think about it, we've combined these things, and it's now both things. Okay, shut the fuck up.
And also a case of like, maybe it's like, that was a traumatic event, so maybe Ash doesn't remember it too clearly. It's all just a violent blur of nonsense.
Exactly. And they kind of imply that whenever they show flashbacks, is that he doesn't, he remembers things, but like it is just chaos, like, and you're just like, yeah, fair. Like you're like, fair enough. But I think that's such a great visual moment too. Like
Also,
a great piece of directing. You're
was
like,
it
oh, shit.
I think it was season 2. The joke that Ash makes when they're in the high school, where he's just like, "Oh, it's where I met my first Linda."
Yeah, no, that's in season 3, and I fucking lost it when he said that. He's like, oh yeah, that's where I met my first Linda. I was like, first Linda. Like I was like, Jesus. Like I was like, Jesus, fuck. Like, but I thought that was awesome. Like I think that it's kind of like, I think that's kind of the attitude is they kind of just lean into everything that is Evil Dead, even if it's weird, you know, like it's kind of like, does that not line up? Who gives a fuck? It's Evil Dead. Let's go. You know, like let's keep moving. You
just
know?
being like, yeah, sometimes the continuity doesn't match. Whatever. Let's just have fun and make fun of it.
I like season 1. I like season 1. I think it's a lot of fun. Of course, I think the real show stealer of this entire show, other than Bruce Campbell, is Lucy Lawless. Her just being here elevates the show. She does a great job. You could tell she's having a fucking blast. Like every time she's doing like a bloody, disgusting scene, you can kind of see this like smile behind her eyes that
I always
she's
think
having
of like
a good time.
I always think of the bit in season 3 where Ash just rams a chainsaw through her stomach. I think it's Ash.
Yes.
Whoever rams a chainsaw through her stomach, and she's practically like giddy about it.
Yes, right? Like super excited about it. I love that.
And it makes sense because, and you didn't even know this until like we talked about it, but like Sam Raimi was a producer on Xena, so he knows Lucy Lawless, and he's also familiar with New Zealand production, which is why Ash vs. Evil Dead was shot there, because it's cheap, baby.
It's cheap, baby. That's why Lord of the Rings was shot there. Tax credit.
Also,
but
I totally forgot that Samara Weaving was in season 1, like right before her career kind of took off.
Right?
It's like, oh shit, like, what up?
It's true. You're like, oh. I was surprised when they straight up killed her. Because they were kind of like building her up to being like, you're in this show, you know, like you are this, you are the cop, and you are, you know, like you are gonna be with Pablo and Kelly, and then they just killed her, and I was like, oh damn! Like I was like, okay, like I was like, some balls on this show.
I'm not talking about the cop. I'm talking about the passerbys when they're at the cabin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Blonde... You are exactly right.
Yeah, the blonde girl that Pablo is crushing on. That's Samara Weaving from like Ready or Not.
Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry. I was combining names, but yes, because I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, I know that face. Like I was like, where is she from? And then I had to like IMDb her, and I was like, oh. Like, I was
in case you didn't know, Frank, this is what, or not. In case you didn't know, folks, this is what Frank does when we watch stuff. Like, if it sticks in his craw and he can't recognize it, he'll just, like, IMDb it, like, right in front of you. We gotta know. We have to know all the ins and outs.
I gotta know.
We always want to know how the sausage is made.
It's true. It's half the fun. You know, like watching a movie sometimes is knowing how the sausage is made.
But yeah, because I also rewatched this. I wasn't going to work on memory because I hadn't watched it since it first aired.
Yeah.
So I rewatched it. I just made it a part of like the 30 movies that I watch with Alex. It's just like, let's just throw Ash vs. Evil Dead in there. We can pretty much get through a season each in one sitting.
Yeah.
Because it's relatively easy to get through.
Yeah, it's like 2.5 per disc, so like 5 hours for a season or so. So not too bad. Nothing crazy.
Yeah, like it's not that hard to get through.
Definitely crushable.
But season 1, I think, still holds up. It's a lot of fun. It's good setup. It expands the lore. Like, we find out that Ruby created the Necronomicon and stuff like that. Yes. We get into more of, like, the Dark One stuff, especially later on. I think the only time I feel like...
I want to say, I do love the many twists of Ruby throughout this show. I will say, because they first play you being like, Ruby is the sister of the girl who comes into the cabin in Evil Dead 2. What's her name? I'm blanking on the character.
I'm forgetting her name too. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But they're basically like, she's the sister, she's the daughter of the original professors, is basically what they're implying. And then then you basically see her die after like 3 or 4 episodes, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, like this vengeful person who's been trying to kill Ash, like kind of a cool plot point, and then they just kill her? I was like, what's going on here? And then literally the next episode, she walks out of the ashes of a fire, and you're like, something's up. and I that's when I was like, oh, Lucy Lawless is having way too much fun with this role. I went from being like, she's having a good time, but they don't have her a lot in these episodes, to being like, oh no, they are about to like do some shit with this character.
But just the way it like widens the net is very effective. I feel like the only period, and I felt this both when it was airing and rewatching it again, the only point in which I feel like season 1 kind of like sags is when we get to like the militia stuff.
Yeah. It's very much a filler episode.
Yeah, that's when I feel like things start to kind of slow down, because it's just like one last obstacle before we just get to the cabin and get the shit done.
Yeah, I will say that's, yeah, it moves. The season moves pretty well. I wouldn't say,
and the militia thing is set up ahead of time.
Yeah,
but it's still like that's the only point in the season where it's just like, okay, we're starting to like kind of sag in the middle here.
I would say it's hard to pick between season 2 and 3 as my favorite. They are both very good, very fun, and bonkers. I think season 1 does a good job being bonkers, but season 2 and 3 are like, whoop, we know what we're fucking doing now, and they fucking go hard, I feel like, in so many ways. And I feel like season 1's good, but 2 and 3, I'm like, that's my fucking shit right there,
it's one of those things where like season 1 walks so like the following seasons can run.
Yes.
Because season 2 and 3 both just hit the ground running.
And they kind of they go back to the cabin, which I think is a very logical way to conclude season 1. Is they go back to the cabin. They've been fighting Evil Dead the whole season. They finally go, hey, we need to go back to the cabin and bury the book there. And I think that's a very logical way to do the show. It's exactly what you want. It's exactly the way it should be heading. But it's kind of like Ash fighting a new evil at the same place. So it doesn't it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
But I think the going back to the cabin in season 2, even though I was kind of like, we're going back to the cabin again, but we were back in time in the 80s before Ash shows up, is way more fun. Learning about Henrietta and her husband is fucking awesome.
Also,
and
I'm sure half of it was an excuse to just get Ivan Raimi in the Henrietta makeup again.
Right. Like, holy fuck, though, did they do a good job with with the makeup there? You're just like, oh shit. Like, okay. I really love I think they do a fun job of doing Deadites in season 1, but once we get into season 2, they start doing like Kandarian demon transformations.
Yeah, once we expand beyond traditional Deadites and start to do more creative stuff like Ruby's Children and stuff like that, and we get into like Ball, you're like, yeah, we're starting to like really widen the universe now, and I appreciate it.
Ball felt like the biggest swing in this whole show. It feels like the most not connected thing going on, and it works. Like, is that Ball is never mentioned in any of the fucking things. Like, it maybe they say his name, maybe, but they don't say, like, you're never like Ball the demon. Like, it's not, like they mention Kandar, but nobody ever has mentioned Ball before this. And he's brought in as like even like is in control of Ruby, who's been the big bad this whole time. And you're kind of like, okay, and it works. It expands on the demon lore. It's wild and different than what we're used to with like with body snatching and shit like that. Mm-hmm. I feel like it changes up the body snatching from just being like, oh, they're deadites, to being like, oh shit, that's Ball. Like, oh shit, that's Ball. Like, and I feel like that's when you're like, okay, show, we're really doing it. You know, like this is something completely different now. We are not just doing Evil Dead 1 and 2 again, you know, like,
Yeah.
or, you know, like with this, that's why I feel that it's like Ball is sort of a weird part of the plot, but I feel like it's where I started to be like, oh, I love this show, you know, like, cause I was like, oh, it's doing something completely different now, you know, like we are beyond the cabins, you know, like, and I was like, that's fucking cool, you know, like,
yeah.
and
I
like
just,
that one.
I do agree with you that they do like lean on the cabin a little too much. I feel like if you were going to go back, you play that card once and then you don't do it again.
Yeah, and it was kind of like they played it for them to go back, and then they played it again to try to be like, let's go back in time and try to get rid of it. Which it's so much better the second time that I'll forgive it. But it is one of those things that I'm like, you're exactly right, Deshaun. I'm like kind of like, we go to the cabin one time, we're done.
Yeah.
All right. Like yeah. Like let's keep moving on. Which is why I was slightly into Rise, is I was like, all right, let's never touch the cabin again. Let's keep moving.
Just,
you know, like
just move away from it. It's fine. I even like that Rise like sort of baits you into thinking it's going into that with its opening, and you're like, nope.
It's free. I do enjoy the opening.
But season 3 starts to like really get into like the Dark Ones stuff.
Yeah.
Of like the origins of the Necronomicon and like where these demons come from and stuff. You're like, shit, all this precious lore.
and that's the thing, is I feel like, I will say, you know, we're raving this show. This is not everyone's cup of tea. You probably already knew that, going like, oh, an Evil Dead show that's probably going to be bloody and disgusting. No, this is going to be way more bloody and disgusting.
It's bloody and disgusting. It's crass. Like it is kind of like the horror show that we would have dreamed of years ago, back when TV didn't have like the ability to do stuff like this.
Yeah, because I will say, it's hard to do TV horror. It's really hard. It's just the way episodic format is. You know, it's like, I love X-Files, I love Doctor Who, but there's very few episodes that are able to capture horror. You know, like actually scary. You know, like, and there is some. You know, even Star Trek has some scary episodes. But I think Ash vs. the Evil Dead is able to keep some horror vibes up pretty effectively throughout this entire thing, you know, like actually keep it kind of frightening and gross, and you're just like, all right, okay, like,
and
let's
endlessly
go.
funny, and sometimes all three at the same time.
At the same time,
like,
like
I asked you when you started season 2. I asked you, like, did you get to the scene in the morgue?
Yep,
because
and the scene in the morgue is, I think it might be the reason to watch the show. I say that very tentatively, but it's so incredible,
gross,
like, you know,
and scary and hilarious. That moment where he gets pulled up, I laughed so hard I got lightheaded. I was fucking dead.
You know, when he's like, not up the ass,
not the butt, not the butt, not the butt, ah!
I was losing it. It's so, like, it's those scenes that make me so happy for this show, because it's Bruce, like I said earlier, Bruce Campbell can sell anything, and he proves it in this show. He fucking sells every weird situation he's in, and he's able to sell that he's fighting an intestine monster that somehow drags him up a man's ass, and it's just, it's one of those things where, yes, it's a funny scene and it's gross and, like, it's funny, but also I feel like you have to give credit to Bruce Campbell. He fucking sells it. He, like, he feels in it. It feels 100%. I give complete. The man's one of the best living actors alive, and we undercredit him.
And it's just, he even undercredits himself. I remember, like, a few years ago, like around the convention circuit, before Ash vs. Evil Dead was a thing, you know, fans would always come up and ask him, are you ever going to do another Evil Dead? Let's do another Evil Dead. You're never going to play Ash again. And he would always say, like, I'm too old for that now.
Oh, man.
And of course the fandom would collectively be like, no, you're not.
no, you're not. And that's exactly what happens here is like, no, you are not. And that makes it even better. You know, like I think that having not an old Ash here makes it pretty great. I was wondering if they were going to do with like, you know, all the Ash clone babies that they were doing over the seasons, if there was going to be like a young, handsome Ash he had to fight. You know, like I was excited about that, but then they always did like older Ash. He's fighting a clone of older Ash.
Like theoretically,
which I was like
that,
that's fine.
That one clone that Ruby makes should be a young Ash, but it's just one of those things where like, it's really just, I'm sure they're like, we don't have the fucking money to like try to de-age him or anything like that. It's
de-age him, or you would have to recast somebody, you know, like get somebody who it looks like a young Ash Williams, you know,
a young like Bruce
I
Campbell,
think would have been fun. But
it'd be a tough find, but go ahead.
If this was if this was Disney, they would have been like, it's Mark Hamill's body. You know, they would have been like, here, we did it, we Mark Hamill,
we deep faked him.
Like, yeah, we deep faked him. They absolutely would have, because they definitely are just kind of working with what they have here, and I kind of appreciate that also about Ash.
And we've also talked about how like limitations can breed creativity, especially for horror.
Yes. Now. And we brought up the morgue scene, but that's
early on.
It's bloody and disgusting, but it's only part of how bloody and disgusting. I want to get that across here, is that there's a lot of violent, like we were saying, horror shows, it's hard to do horror. It's also hard to do gore on television. You know, like it's just not possible. You can't do it. This is straight up movie gore the entire fucking time. Non-stop, blood everywhere, body parts everywhere. It's non-stop the entire time. If you're a gore fan, I gotta tell you, this is the fucking show for you. This fucking goes over the top constantly with it, and is impressive most of the time. There is some really bad CGI, but you're kind of like, it's a TV show. I'm gonna fucking let it go. I'm just gonna fucking let it go. You know, like, but there is moments where you're like, yeah, that big blood looked bad.
And it also helps that it's also a comedic show, which I think also makes it easier to forgive. In the same way that like I like Drag Me to Hell, but God, some of the effects in that are so fucking bad.
So fucking bad. I will say one of the weirdly good CGI. There was several good CGI effects in the final season. I will say there was some bad CGI in the earlier seasons. But the good ones that I was actually surprised by are the cell phone demon, which I thought would look really bad, but for some reason that works for me. I'm totally fine with that cell phone demon. I thought that was great. I think it's a little insulting that they make Ash's daughter fight. Instead of like her hand, they make her fight her cell phone. I think it's not sexist, but it's very close to ageist. You know, like it's one of those things where you're like,
I was gonna say that, like, it's less sexist and more like older people.
Oh, these kids.
Kids. Yeah, it has that kind of energy to it.
It does. I think that's a great scene.
Well, talk about like another thing.
That she could be Bruce Campbell's daughter.
She's really good in the third season. That's like one of those plot points where like on paper it's just like, I don't know about that. Do we really need to like do that? We don't want to go that route. Do we?
I will say
and
that
it actually works.
I will say I had a hard time choosing between season 2 and 3 as my favorite, but 3 does things that I would not expect to work. Several times, and it's the reason why I think it's one of the best TV show endings fucking ever, is that it literally delivers. It delivers, guys. It first off says, I'm gonna do an estranged daughter, and you're like, oh, don't do that. That sounds weird and strange that you're gonna just Ash has a daughter. They somehow make this work and build it in and make you give a shit, and you're like, okay. I didn't think I would care, but you made it, you like really worked this into the plot and made you care about his daughter and him wanting to like be a good dad and like try to do his best. Like it somehow works when it's such a cheesy plot point anywhere else. You know, like it's one of those things that I was like, ooh, but then they bring it through. And the other thing that makes it one of the best TV show endings ever is that a lot of shows try to devolve to an apocalypse at the end. You know, like they try to, you know, like, oh, it's the end of the world. And then they do some sort of, you know, I immediately point at Game of Thrones. It's the end. Winterfell is about to fall. The Ice King's about to win. All Arya does is drop a knife, stab him. So you don't have like a true win. You have like a literal like a sleight of hand, and they won. That's like, you know, it's mostly the problem of putting your characters in an impossible situation. It's something you always want to build up when you're writing a story. You want to build up to the climax feeling impossible for your characters to beat, which is what they're doing here at the end of Ash vs. the Evil Dead. They're kind of like, nope, the Evil Dead's, the Ancient Ones are loose. They have released Kondar, and all the town is now Deadites. You're fucked. You know,
which,
like,
that was another instance of pretty good CG was Kondar. Because, like, you do a giant demon, you're like, ooh, on a TV budget, let's see. And it actually looked really good.
It looks really good. But they somehow are able to do Ash fighting, you know, all the Deadites throughout town, and him fight the giant demon, and it not feel out of character, a sleight of hand, tricky in any ways. Ash literally goes up and does what he meant to do. He gets in a fucking tank, loads up the Kondarian dagger as a shell, and launches it into that fucking demon. Mm-hmm. And I gotta say, I fucking love that. I love that a show was just like, yeah, that's what he's gonna do, and that's what he fucking does. You know, like, and you're just like, oh, hell yeah. Like, and then that it just ends and jumps to like, oh yeah, it's Mad Max time, and the Knights fucking saved you, and now you gotta keep fighting the good fight. Made me be like, I fucking love this ending. What a great ending!
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It wasn't supposed to be the intended ending. Like, they had plans for a season 4, but I feel like it's a good place to stop. Accidentally. Yeah. Like, one, it brings it full circle, because that was basically the original intended ending for Army of Darkness. Was that like, oops, kind of I fucked up again, and now I'm in a dystopian future. So Sam Raimi finally gets to do that. And the idea of like, oh, he gets to kind of, the adventure never ends. Always on to the next thing.
Exactly.
Like, it feels satisfying.
That's the right ending. It's a satisfying ending. First off, because you get everyone back to life at the end. I feel like they do a good job of bringing, you know, like Kelly's back, and like everybody's there. Everybody's healed. The daughter is saved. You know, like everybody is safe, and it's Ash going off to face the ending. It's very satisfying in a way where you're just like, yeah, this is, you know, he had to go mano a mano. He's the El Jefe. He had to do it. You know, like, this is what it was meant to do. And then he does it. And I was just like, it's one of those things that a lot of shows are like, yeah, here's the apocalypse. We're going to do the apocalypse. And then they like low budget it. They don't go all out. They kind of don't fucking do the ending as big as it should. This is a huge, like, big budget ending, and it feels great.
Would I have liked a fucking Mad Max ass season of Ash vs. Evil Dead? Well, yes. But
absolutely.
Even if you don't like, you don't get like the conclusion. We just kind of ride off into the sunset into another adventure. I mean, we had Ash defeat Kondar.
Right?
Like, that's pretty fucking conclusive.
Pretty conclusive. And yeah, and like send the Dark Ones away and defeat Ruby, you know, like it's over, you know, like, which is, they could have kept going and I would have loved to see more, but I'm cool with it, you know, like I really enjoyed these. I think that these, Deshaun, thank you for letting me borrow them. Guys, if you have not watched Ash vs. the Evil Dead and you're thinking like, oh, I love Evil Dead, but like, I don't think a TV show about it will work, you're wrong.
It really does.
It works.
You wouldn't think it would, but it does.
You wouldn't think it would. Is really like the main thing about it. You really wouldn't think it would, but that's kind of the show. Is that you're like, none of this should fucking work, and it still does, and you're like, all right. So guys, we've been talking a lot about Ash vs. Evil Dead because it's a lot of content. But let's go into Evil Dead Rise.
Before we do Rise, I've only played a little bit of it, but I do want to just point out the attention to detail I appreciate with the new Evil Dead game. especially since we did play, especially since you've watched Ash vs. Evil Dead, and we've talked about like the rights issues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The shit that they were able to pull off with this game is pretty impressive. One, it does play in a similar way to like Friday the 13th or your Dead by Daylight, but there's more polish there. So it's like runs a lot stabler.
So are you not playing as Ash then? Like,
you can play as Ash.
Kill the Deadites? But like, can you kill the Deadites? I'm confused.
You can play
sorry,
as...
I know very little about this game. So
yeah,
that's why I'm asking.
If you can play as Ash or any of like not just Ash, you can play as every version of Ash.
Oh. Like
Evil Dead 1, 2, Army of Darkness, the show, everything. That's Kelly and Pablo are both there as playable characters.
That's great.
Like every variation. So you have like that and also playing as like the evil itself. In the same way that like you get to play as Jason. You're either a camp counselor or you're Jason. They do the same thing there. It's a pretty fun game. I need to play more of it, but just the idea that like the amount of rights issues this franchise always has whenever we make a new one, the fact that they were able to actually get all of this stuff in here, like, we got everything from the movies and the shows.
And I mean, to talk on it, other modern things that are happening right now, this Evil Dead, the next expansion of Magic the Gathering is Evil Dead. Like, literally, Evil Dead Magic the Gathering cards, guys. Like, so if you,
I'm sure the Magic purists are like, again, just so mad.
God. I mean, yeah, after the debacle of the One Ring card, I feel like they're being very sensitive with their properties at the moment. So,
well, that and like you have Magic purists that like even the idea of when they started doing licensed stuff like just irritates them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, as a guy who grew up playing Magic the Gathering, I don't like it. It's one of those things that one of the things I loved about Magic the Gathering was the weird lore and world they were always creating with the Magic cards, you know, like that there was something going on behind it. So for them to just be like, there's Lord of the Rings ones now, and there's Evil Dead ones now,
and Doctor Who.
And Doctor Who, and you're just kind of like, that's cool. It's a cool concept, but that's not what this game is. You know, like that's not what I came to play Magic the Gathering for, you know, like, but at the same time, we would never get an actually good Doctor Who card game. We would never get an actually good Evil Dead card game, and you would never get an actually good Lord of the Rings card game because I've played them and they all fucking suck. I'm sorry. They're not good. The Lord of the Rings card game was ass. It just made me want to play Hearthstone, which is the worst compliment I could give any game. Where you're just like, oh, did it make me want to do crack? Like, is basically it. You know, like you're like, fuck off. So like that's what I'm slightly for with those things. Is I'm kind of like, I hate that you're ditching like the Magic the Gathering universe for properties, but at the same time, I would never get to hold Ash Williams, the Magic the Gathering card, you know, otherwise, you know, or an Ash the Williams, you know, a full Evil Dead card game that would actually be good, you know, like, it's like, and if I'm wrong, guys, please comment down below with a link to the Amazon card game for any of these that I'm not playing. Please, I want to play them. I'm a card game. When I get into a card game, it's fucking, I get into it.
Yeah, like, I'm not a big card game player, but I understand the plight of like the purists.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Now, so for the video game though, that I did see it on sale the other week, and it's doing well. Is there a future of that it will go down and you shouldn't own this game? Kind of like Friday the 13th, you know, where you can only play with your friends and that's it at this point, you know, like, or
I don't know, only because with games like that, I don't play with randos ever anyway.
Yeah.
Like randos annoy me. So I'm always playing with just the usual crew anyway. So who knows? Yeah. I don't know. I never know what the lasting power of games like this will be. Whenever you make a game that's like solely multiplayer, it always has a limited time span.
It's true. Well, you say that, and how many years of Fortnite's going on now, you know? Like, I thought that would be dead by this point, and now it's fucking insanely big.
True. But
I saw an ad the other day, by the way, which was so fucking funny. they were like, you get all the BetterHelp ads all the time, and then you get this guy had, I'm a counselor who will play Fortnite with you in your squad, and we'll have a 30-minute session that way. And I was like, I'm glad that these people can get therapy, but this is very strange. I was like, this is
it's so funny when
everyone deserves access to therapy, but what?
I hate that. I thought the Fortnite reference in Avengers Endgame was gonna feel dated in like a couple months, and it's still fucking relevant.
Right? I agree. It's one of those things where you're like, I remember seeing in the theater going, oh, they referenced Fortnite, and you're just like, but now years later you're like, they're still playing Fortnite,
It's like shit, we're beyond a 5-year time skip, and they're still fucking playing Fortnite.
Just the idea that a lot of games, Minecraft is though,
like eventually
Minecraft won't last forever.
Servers shut down, service stops, and even if it's successful, they usually move on to like a sequel.
It's why I think a lot of people stick to Steam other than going to like an Epic Store or any other game launcher, is that they've learned from the random game launchers that they'll go down and then you just lose your games. You know, and I feel like that's the reason why people stick with Steam, is they know that that's the point of the company and that's what they work to do and that's how they make their profit,
Yeah, and they were also the first one to the race. They've been around the longest. They're the most stable because of just years of fucking Valve being on top of it, and the sales are always insane.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you should always be hesitant when you're not getting physical media. I know that's the point of this show, guys, is the Warp Shelf. What are you gonna put on your shelf? And I think that's one of the dangerous parts about these online only multiplayer games, is that they will disappear to history. Will literally go away at a certain point.
If it's a licensed game, especially, you're fucked.
Fucked.
Fucked. Scott Pilgrim wasn't available for an entire console generation. It was on the PS3 and 360. Then the rights lapsed from Universal, and it was just gone.
Yeah,
until they re-released it.
It's crazy.
That's why when Limited Run made copies of it, I got fucking 2.
And we're coming into a more digital age where it's like, oh yeah, just get a digital. Worry about it, guys. Worry about it. With people collapsing, you should be fucking worried about it. Or being bought up, like with Funimation being bought up into Sony and Crunchyroll, and they're still sitting there being like, you'll pay for Funimation still, right? And you're like, just become Crunchyroll. Stop this.
It more or less has already.
It has. They're just kind of getting the money from the people who don't understand what's going on, is what I think. You're just like, fuck. But besides the point, we're going off. Evil Dead Rise, newest 2023, correct? Right? I'm not saying that wrong.
Yeah, it was this year.
2023. It's this year. So a lot of people were saying to me that they were like, this is my favorite horror movie of this year, and I'm kind of like, I hope there's some better horror this year. Not because so my problem with this, of course, is that I'm coming off 3 seasons of this beautiful bitch. I'm coming off 3 seasons of Ash vs. Evil Dead. I'm coming off Evil Dead, watching it. I'm going into Evil Dead Rise. And I think they're doing a lot of fun things. I think this is a fun movie that's really swinging at points, and I enjoy that. I need a horror movie to swing, I don't want it to hold back. Like when they held back on the eye thing was my only time that I was like, well, you guys are holding back. What the fuck is this shit? But otherwise, it goes pretty full throttle when it hits it. But I think that my expectations were a little high going in, and I was trying not to, as I was like, I know the reviews aren't crazy for this movie. I know it's not supposed to be anything amazing, but I still went in being like, fuck yeah, and I think that was my issue, is that if I had just been like, yeah, more Evil Dead, instead of being like, give me something fucking good, and that's kind of what I would say my review is here. If you are an Evil Dead fan, this is it, guys. This is fun. It's more, it's more Evil Dead.
It's fun.
In a fun way.
I had a good time. I think its biggest positive is that it just kind of opens things up by introducing another book, and basically by the end being like, we don't even really need the Necronomicon necessarily. We definitely don't need the cabin. We can maybe even just turn this into an anthology where we just tell Evil Dead stories and fuck the continuity. I'm like,
yeah,
why not? I don't care.
Yeah, why not? And that's kind of what this feels like, is that this sort of feels like, you know, with all the other Evil Deads very much leaning into the cabin, this feels like an anthology in a way. You know, It feels like it's just part of the Evil Dead universe, you know? And that's not bad. That's not, it's definitely not bad. I think that that's actually probably the best idea, not to be like, Mia's here, you know, somewhere, or Ash is around here somewhere. Like, yes, would I have loved that at the end, you know, the gate's closing and then a hand stops the gate from closing and then it's fucking Ash Williams to chop him up? Yeah, I would have loved that. But that's not what this is. You know, like, that's not what this movie is. Now, as I'm saying that, yes, this is very different and it's trying to be different, it definitely loves its Evil Dead. Lots of Evil Dead references all throughout this. They repeat line, Dead by Dawn. You know, they do the whole Dead by Dawn thing. And which was removed from the Evil Dead, actually. I mean, from Evil Dead Remake. They had a Dead by Dawn scene, and it's in the trailer, and it's not in the movie. Which I thought is quite interesting, actually. So you have to see, like, the director's cut to see that scene. But I think that this movie does a great job of going from starting off strong, being kind of like, okay, we're starting off, and then devolving. You know, like, it does a good job of doing the very classic Evil Dead, like, this just keeps getting way worse. Like, this is just so bad, you know, like, and I think that they do a good job of that, is that it feels Evil Dead, you know, like, you are not sitting there being like, this isn't Evil Dead, this is stupid. You are definitely like, no, it's Evil Dead, you know, like, this feels like it.
It's just on its own little tangent. It's in its own bubble.
Which I'm fine with, you know, it's just, I don't think the pacing is as strong as it should be. I think that the pacing is not very good. It kind of keeps going back to listening to those records, Deshaun, and that's what bothered me pacing-wise the most. I was like, just play them. Why do we keep, like, going and, like, okay, let's set up and listen, you know, like, what are we doing here? Just, like, listen to these things. Like,
yeah, and I get, like, they were trying to get around, like, okay, we don't want to have it be on, like, a tape recorder. What do we do?
Yeah.
Okay, we put it on a record, and we'll just have that, and we'll just have one of the kids be a music nerd. So, like, all right, that works.
And he wants to play a vinyl.
But, like, the constant stop-start, I get why they were doing that for, like, the tension. But it's also one of those things that's like, yeah, but just fucking play it also.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it does not play the same. Like, they're trying to do the same feeling as, oh, we should listen to the rest of the tape as the original Evil Dead, where they go back and they listen to the rest of the tape afterward and you hear what the professor has to say. It doesn't work the same here, you know, like, even though it pretty much is the same thing, you know, like, I'm criticizing these vinyls, but it is an effective moment, but I do think it stops the plot. It's one of those things that to have a character sit down and, like, listen to something always just fucking
while there's fucking
the plot.
Chaos going on outside that room.
You're just like, okay, this is the tone. That's the tonal whiplash I'm talking about, where it's like,
and I feel like,
you know, like,
an easy solution around that would have just been to, like, get rid of the headphones, just have it play on the speakers, and have just the whole thing, like, the whole, like, accounts play in the background while shit's happening. If we have it, if we're outside of the room and we're focusing on a set piece, we don't need to necessarily have it playing because they're not paying attention to it, so neither would we. But at key moments, like, so, whatever's being said ties into what's going on. We get to hear, like, the slow descent of, like, what they went through on the recording. So it all, it's less like,
first off, that's a great idea. And second off, it's one of those things that's exactly it. Is that they're trying to capture that feeling from Evil Dead where they go back to listen to it, but in Evil Dead 2, they just let they just start the tape up again in the basement. When he's down in the basement and the film starts, it's just playing while this chaos is happening, and that would have felt more Evil Dead than being like, let's stop.
Yeah.
Listen,
The problem with the stop and listen is that it has the same like vibe to it as when you feel like a movie comes to a fucking halt because it's exposition time.
Yes, and that's exactly what this is. It's like an exposition disc. Let's put the exposition disc on and listen.
Put the headphones aside. Class.
And even though it's a creepy, they do a good job of keeping it creepy with the vinyls. It's a plot stopper, and I feel like that plot stopping also goes into her trying to save the kids. They keep going into other rooms, and it kind of like it just feels like the plot stops unrealistically at a lot of points, and you're just like, ooh. And I feel like that's my main issue here with this, because otherwise it's got some effective moments. There's some good blood and gore. I do like the soundtrack. The air raid stuff from Evil Dead kind of comes back. So the remake has an air raid siren as part of the soundtrack, basically, and they work that in here, and I thought that was kind of cool. And it definitely,
the makeup is good. I think the actress playing the mother's like really good in the part.
I would say that she's one of the most impressive Deadites of the whole series. Almost, I think she does such a good job of playing that evil mother. And I'm like, okay. And I like this idea of like tearing apart a family instead of like a brother and sister. Like I liked that. But could it have been faster? Yes.
Also,
could it move smoother? Yes.
Also, can we not, with the fucking plot line of like woman who has independence suddenly gets pregnant and needs to find herself because she's having a child?
Yeah.
She needs to
I'm like, this is 2023.
She needs to settle down, so let's put a baby in her so she can finally relax and become part of like the usual nuclear unit. It's just like, can we not do that?
Yeah. I do like what they're doing with her being pregnant. Do I like that they like? I like it as a plot point and what they're like, and it kind of like grinds into her character of she keeps being like, I'm not a groupie, but she got pregnant from one of the band members. So you're like, it's like she I love that grading of her character where she's like, I want to build up and be that tech for the band, but then she's sleeping with the band.
Yeah, shit happens.
And it's just like, and you're just like, oh, and even in her sister's eyes, she's a groupie more than she is a tech working on something, and that sucks, and I feel like that was one of the more effective writing parts of this whole movie. I was like, damn, that's some fucking shit right there.
But you could still do that without the pregnancy though. Like you could still do that as a character thing.
One of my there is some good writing moments. We're crapping on the exposition spout, but I did really love the beginning when she's reading Wuthering Heights to her. I love that instead of the cards in Evil Dead 1, like they're doing the spades. I did like her reading the Wuthering Heights to her. I thought that was I don't know, I kind of like that. I thought that I was like, I like the idea that that these are demons and they do not only fucked up things to you but can read your mind almost, like, and I think that's I liked that bit of it, I also like the general setting. We talk about how it's good that it gets outside of the cabin, that it like baits you with it at first and then we pivot to the apartment and that pays off later. But I like this like creepy old apartment, even though it's very clearly not LA. Why are you even trying? You should have just left it nondescript. Yeah,
my fucking ass. That's an LA apartment. Come on now.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of rundown hotels and big buildings that people do live in. But
true,
I know what
but
you're
that
saying.
sure
It's
as hell
not
ain't
super
LA.
realistic. Yeah.
Especially not with all those breaking accents, especially for the children. Just like, oh yeah, you're trying your best, but I can hear the Kiwi slipping out.
I can hear the Kiwi. It's true. You're like, wait a minute. it's also one of those things that the only thing that screamed LA to me was the door gate in the garage in the basement. I was like, that's LA. Like I was like, because even in New York, they don't, that's very rare to like have your own gate pushing thing. That's very more an LA thing. I was like, okay, that feels LA. But otherwise, I know what you're saying. You're just like, this could have been anywhere, and you probably should have said
just
that.
any
other
town
than
USA.
being like, oh, it's an earthquake. We can play that off as not being weird, But
That's
at the
true.
same time, an earthquake being weird would have worked also, so it's one of those things that, like,
I mean, earthquakes can still happen. It's just a matter of likelihood.
Yeah, and severity.
Yeah.
And so so the thing I want to say about Evil Dead Rise is that in my rankings, is it my least favorite Evil Dead? Yeah. Does that mean it's bad? No.
No.
Did I have fun watching it? Yeah, I did. Were my expectations probably too high? Yeah, because I was coming off of Ash vs. Evil Dead, and then you basically pitched me that it's Evil Dead The Raid. Like, that's why my problem with the setting, Deshaun, because my favorite action movie of all time other than Terminator 2 is The Raid and The Raid 2. And that's because they fight their way through the apartment complex, and it's just fucking epic. I feel like they didn't play up the apartment complexes. Maybe they probably should have. Like we did a little bit of duck things.
Didn't like take advantage of the setting enough, because that like opens things up. You can make things really tense out of that.
Yeah, it felt like there was one floor that was being terrorized by the Evil Dead, and that was kind of it. And I'm like, is that the only people who live in this building?
Especially with the ending where like we tie it back to the opening, where it's just like, oh god, I couldn't sleep at all with the storm outside. I somehow didn't hear all the crazy shit that was going on in this apartment.
I was like, you didn't hear the shotgun going off downstairs? What the fuck? Like, I was like, it was the only part of that like twist around to the beginning that I was like, really?
It did.
I was like,
maybe established that like, oh, all that shit was going on the very top floor. This is a large building. She's on the bottom, and there's a storm. Maybe, but like, there ain't no fucking way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where you're just like, did you not see the flooded elevator full of blood? Did you not
Which
get
is a
down
cool
to the
sequence.
lobby? Yo, great sequence.
Just like, hey kids, you like The Shining?
Yeah, well, and it's also they do a reference to the original Evil Dead with the projector filling up with blood, with the buttons filling up. So it's like a little bit of a Kubrick reference, a little bit of Evil Dead reference, a little bit of Evil Dead remake reference with being like, okay, we gotta put a fuck ton of blood in this to amp up to the rain that happened in Evil Dead, which we didn't talk about. That's something like, so the director says it's something like 60,000 gallons of blood he used for the Evil Dead rain scene. Now, to pretty much sum up why you'll probably be disappointed in Evil Dead Rise, they only use 1,700 gallons of blood to make Trash. Weak sauce.
Yep.
No, are you kidding? 1,700 gallons is an insane amount of blood.
It's insane. But you watch the Evil Dead, and that's another like great set piece from the remake is the fucking raining blood. It's amazing.
The raining blood is fucking amazing. It's one of those things that, you're sitting there being like, oh, it's not very remakey, but once they start doing their own things, you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's fucking go.
There are cool ideas, like the fucking Deadites combining is cool.
Yes.
And I like the idea that we could get crazier stuff, like the further you go along in any given one of the books, that we could get crazy, like weird hybrid shit like that. But I needed more.
Yes, because after, Evil Dead 2 with Henrietta, like, blowing up, getting big, and getting, like, pussy, it's like,
and plus
then they do that
the one with, like,
show.
the long neck and stuff.
It's one of those things that you're kind of like, I've seen further than just combining three people. Yes, it's gross, ? But, like, it could have got, first off, it could have been scarier. And second off, it could have gone further.
Like, I've seen a version of that that's been like way more frightening. It just wasn't in a movie. It was in a video game called The Last of Us Part 2. They do a version of the Infected where it's basically like a Rat King.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's fucking terrifying looking. It's like the scariest section in the entire game. And it also looks way cooler than what we did here.
And, yeah,
like, after we're done recording, I'll show you a picture of it.
So, I mean, Deshaun, how do you rank them? How do you rank all the Evil Deads? To sum up our two-parter on Evil Dead, how do you rank them all?
Well, how are we dividing Ash vs. Evil Dead into its individual seasons, or are we just saying Ash vs. Evil Dead the whole thing?
Just Ash vs. Evil Dead the whole thing, because it'll be too
specific.
I feel like too specific, you know, like.
From like an objective standpoint, so like what I think has the highest quality from top to bottom, it would probably at the top you'd have Evil Dead 2. Mm-hmm. Then below that, what goes below that? I'm like tossed between like probably maybe like Remake or Ash vs. Evil Dead, then Evil Dead 1, then Army of Darkness, then probably Rise.
All right. I like it.
And that's coming from someone who really likes Army of Darkness, but it's a different beast.
Yeah, I feel like that is the problem here is I hate to say it about Evil Dead Rise, is that I don't like it as much as I like Army of Darkness, and Army of Darkness was always the weakest of this franchise, you know?
Yeah.
And for it to be like somehow not as much fun or as engaging as Army of Darkness made me be like, that's bad, guys. You know,
it's only weak, like, relatively speaking. Like, I could see why it did so well, especially since we haven't had a movie like this in a while, because, like, the remake was a while back. So if we're just going by movies, it's been a bit. I'm sure, like, it was a breath of fresh air. It was nice to see, like, some gore stuff.
Very nice.
But,
and especially in a year where I was really liking Smile, and I thought Smile was one of the better ones this year, but it wasn't, like, it wasn't over the top gory or sending it, and I like that this tried to, you know, devolve into fucking chaos, you know. Like like I'm like, okay, all right, that's cool. Even though I
like,
do like
you need a movie like
Smile.
this. You need a movie like this at least once a decade just to like really get under people's skins. Just like, you guys are getting a little too soft. Let's fuck you up a little bit.
Let's fuck you up a bit. I know. I feel like that's probably what Terrifier is for people. I haven't watched any of them.
Neither have I. I've been meaning to.
Yeah, I'm. It's one of those things that might be my, you know, end running into Halloween watches is.
Yeah, because those are both on Screambox, right?
They're both up there, and he originally appears in a short film in an anthology horror movie.
Okay.
So, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, the name of it, but it is the clown. What's his name? Art the clown is in that for like a short, and then he has Terrifier and Terrifier 2. So,
okay.
So I was like, oh, that might be my personal watch after I finish all the Evil Dead stuff. Like, might be, but you know, because I know it's about to be fucking disgusting. So I was like, I'm all amped up now after Evil Dead. I can take anything.
The point is, like the Evil Dead franchise is still relatively unmarked. Like even Evil Dead Rise being like on the bottom of the poll, it's still a solid time. It's a good time.
On the bottom of the poll.
Like these are, I would still argue these are all good movies. These are all solid.
No,
so far still
guys,
Evil Dead is still Evil Dead still for me has a miss.
Is because if you have listened to our last Halloween episodes, you know we've done Friday the 13th, we've done Nightmare on Elm Street. There's some bad ones. Guys. There just is, you know, like there's ones I enjoy them. I did enjoy the line in Evil Dead Rise here where they were like, "Oh, we're gonna watch Nightmare on Elm Street," and the little kid's like, "Even the bad ones." And he's like, "There is no bad ones," and I immediately was like, "Yeah, there's bad
there
ones,
are bad ones. There's a bad one immediately after the first one."
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of merit to 2, but it is a bad movie. You know, like there's a lot to love about 2, but it doesn't work for a reason. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's a cult movie for a reason. But there's stuff to love. Like if you've ever watched the movie, the documentary Scream Queen, they kind of like go into the behind the scenes.
Yeah,
of that
we
movie.
talked about it in the episode. But either way, like Evil Dead, as far as horror franchises are concerned, it's still going strong. It still hasn't had a big miss.
I will say, we sound like we're talking shit on Rise. Please don't think that.
Rise is a good time.
Rise is a good time. It's just I went in with a lot of expectations, but overall, it's a good time. It fits in with the rest of the movies. It's definitely not like a Halloween 3 where you're like, where the fuck did this come from? It is, this is, and it's definitely not Nightmare on Elm Street 2 where you're like, what the fuck are we doing
also,
here?
For the record, I'm going to put this out there. Halloween 3 is underappreciated. It's actually really good.
Yeah, it's solid. It's solid. it's that, but it's definitely one of those that you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Because
you're like, wait,
no Michael Myers. Maybe you shouldn't have. Maybe that would have been easier to sell if you hadn't made a Halloween 2 with Michael Myers directly afterwards. It might have been easier for you to sell the anthology. But
yeah,
oh well.
Fair enough. Oh well, we're still waiting on Trick or Treat 2, talking about anthologies. He's writing it. He says he's got a good script. I'll keep waiting is all I'll say. I'll keep waiting. That's one of those movies that I'm like, that's never coming, but I'll be so happy when it does. Like when you're like, Trick or Treat 2's here, I'm like, oh fuck yeah, I'm buying tickets.
Yeah,
but,
whether it be that or having Michael Dougherty do another Godzilla movie, I just want more Michael. I just want Michael Dougherty to do more stuff.
Michael Dougherty. I didn't do my ranking of the Evil Dead franchise. It's hard for me, guys. It's very hard, but I think I also go Evil Dead 2, and it's hard for me to go either Ash. I think it's got to be Ash vs. Evil Dead. Ash vs. Evil Dead for 2 on me. Then it's really hard for me to choose between Evil Dead and the Evil Dead. Because it's very similar and they're kind of both going for that tone. I prefer the original because I love Bruce Campbell. That's in my like film brain, I'm like, but the remake does a great job of really capturing scares and bringing you to a new level of horror. But in my other brain, I'm like, but Bruce Campbell, and puking up white blood. I'm all for it, but then again, they also do an effective puking scene in the remake, so that scene is gross. I give it all the credit for that puking scene. You're like, yeah.
And plus, Bruce Campbell in the first movie is still like proto Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, right. He's not even like Ash Williams, he's very like student making a film sort of thing.
You watch the first movie, he still looks like a baby. Then as soon as you get to the second one, it's like, wow, look at this handsome movie star.
Look at this handsome man. But it's the El Jefe himself. But then after those two, I think we the musical's hard to put in these, guys. So we're not going to put the musical in these because it's like, I love the musical. It's not the franchise. I love the musical. It's just, but
it's hard to place it because we're talking like, we're already talking different mediums between like film and TV. It's even harder to place it. It'd be like it's in the same way that like even if I played every single one of the games, it'd be hard to like place it in the ranking because we're talking very different sensibilities, very different medium.
Very true. But I will say, if you do love Evil Dead, go see the musical.
Yeah,
like if you get,
we talked about it last episode.
Now.
Also, apologies for the mistake we made when we did the last episode because we had said Henrietta wasn't in it. I guess we misremembered that Henrietta was in it.
Yeah, she's got the Henrietta mask on when she's in the basement, which I thought was a nice touch, So she's in it, and you're like, all right. Very worth seeing. If you're an Evil Dead fan, it's almost a no-brainer. If you're a musical fan, I feel like if you're a musical fan, you have to go see it also because it's one of those things that it's one of the most unique musicals I've ever seen. So totally worth that. But then, I feel like for me, it's Army of Darkness, then Rise at that point. Just because I'm a little underwhelmed by Rise, but it's not bad, and Army of Darkness is a lot of fun, but it's not the same.
Yeah,
like
your sense of like you following it up after Ash vs. Evil Dead on my end was less that and more like it's been so long since we've had an Evil Dead movie, you better fucking bring it. And it didn't bring it enough for me.
I feel like they bring it. And it feels like Evil Dead, and they go far enough to be like to satisfy any Evil Dead fan, but do they go that much further to be like, this is a great Evil Dead?
Yeah,
No.
like that fucking cheese grater bit is so overhyped.
Oh, but it is good though. Fucking freaked me out.
It's solid,
Not
but
the cheese grater.
the fucking cheese grater's like all over the marketing. Like it's all like on official T-shirts and stuff. You're like, it ain't even all that.
Yeah, right. It's not even. It freaks me out as a concept and when seeing it, but in reality, it didn't do that much damage per se. You know, way worse with the fucking nail guns and the crowbars. You know,
Like there are so many instances you can list that are like worse than that in the remake.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Rise is that there's a lot of scenes that could have been bloodier, you know, or worse, you know, like the even the scissors into the face I feel like isn't enough, you know what I'm saying, you know, like where she gets stabbed in the face with the scissors, and yeah, it's freaky looking and it looks good practical effects wise,
it's in the same I walked away from Rise almost in a very, and I think they were both shot in New Zealand, funnily enough. I walked away from Rise in like a very similar way that I walked away from the Hellraiser reboot.
Oh, okay.
Where it's just like, the Hellraiser reboot was solid, but there were like things about it where it doesn't seem to fully understand what Hellraiser is. Where my biggest thing when I came out of the Hellraiser reboot was just like, it wasn't horny enough.
It wasn't horny enough. What?
Hellraiser is...
I mean, I get what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Hellraiser is very, very sickly sexual, and that's not really in the reboot. And when you keep
that's weird because that's like the point.
Exactly.
Right? Is that it's sexual torture? Like
so like it's there, but it's not there.
But,
so it's just like you kind of miss the point there. But it has its moments. It was a solid time.
It's a solid time. Yeah, and I feel like maybe that's it here is that, you know, they understand Evil Dead in a lot of ways and not understand it in other ways, you know, and you're just like, but overall, I'd say go see all of these movies, guys. This is not a, you know, a franchise that has bad ducks in here.
And they both
got all good ducks.
And it's funny. I'm starting to realize, just thinking about Hellraiser reboot, that there are more parallels. Because with Evil Dead, they do the things like, there's actually more than one book. What they do in the Hellraiser reboot is like, the lament configuration, that's just one configuration. There are multiple ways to solve the box and change it. And you're like, oh
man. But guys, I want to thank you for listening to our giant two-parter here. This is a especially long episode here, a lot longer than our covering the first three movies in the musical. But I think
2 movies and 3 seasons of TV, so
is a lot more to cover. It's a lot more content to cover. Now, guys, I just want to thank you so much for listening. It's been really great to like see your interaction on this, and I just want to say, thank you, and please, hit the buttons down below to make the algorithm work, all that jazz and all that shit. But like, really, thank you for listening and actually wanting to hear what we have to say about these stuff, and hopefully you've learned a few things about the Evil Dead franchise.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn.
Or want to watch some Evil Dead.
Now we'll
that's
have to,
really what I want.
figure out by next October what we'll do next. I really don't want to do Halloween. I'm going to be so mad.
Gonna be so mad. Hey, I mean, maybe we'll do Terrifier now that we've talked about it. Like, it'll be a very short episode.
Yeah. I also wanted to do, like, the Dead trilogy for a long time.
Oh.
Like, Night of the Living, Dawn, and Day.
Oh. That would be that'd be an interesting one because there's so
I'm
many
sure you haven't,
offshoots.
I'm sure you probably haven't seen Day of the Dead in a long time at the very least, which is actually my favorite. I'm like the minority. I really love Day of the Dead.
It's been a while. It's definitely been a while. I had a zombie phase going into college where I was just every zombie content I fucking possibly could, and so I watched it back then. But
okay,
it's been a very.
But that'll also give me the excuse to get them physically, because Criterion has Night of the Living Dead, plus it's public domain.
Ooh. Yeah, it's public domain. So it's free everywhere, guys.
Yeah. And then I'm pretty sure
Shout
Factory did
Evil
Dawn
Dead
and
franchise,
Day.
by the way. But besides, which is a lot different than the Evil Dead right here, I had to buy the Evil Dead on Amazon. It's streaming nowhere. and not even just purchase anywhere. I couldn't purchase it on Google. I had to purchase it on Amazon. Evil Dead 2 is streaming a lot of places, but 4 different places. But Army of Darkness is only streaming on one service, and you couldn't buy it for some reason. I couldn't buy Army of Darkness. I could only watch it. So again, another reason why you need these things, physical media, because what the fuck. And then
and I'm sure it was all theatrical,
Hulu, but yeah, not even the
for Army of Darkness.
I
I doubt like directors is even an option.
No, it's not. It was not an option. It was just like, here's Army of Darkness, and you're like, okay, thanks. And then so Ash vs. the Evil Dead's on Hulu because that is Evil Dead remake was all it's Stars, so Lionsgate. It's all Lionsgate. And then Evil Dead Rise is the first time we're back at New Line Cinema. And New Line Cinema is now owned by HBO and Max or whatever
Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers, So it's the first time it's back in the fucking original gate, like it's back in the original the Evil Dead.
Especially for like this season, it's important to have all this shit in one place. The first time I had ever watched the Rocky franchise, I didn't know 5 existed because they didn't have it on there. They had 1 through 4 and then Balboa, so I didn't even fucking know there was.
Fucking happen.
I didn't even know.
Fucking happen.
I didn't even know 5 was a thing, and then I watched it. I'm like, oh, I get why they skipped this one.
Oh, okay. I see why they did this. Oh God. But guys, just know these are worth owning physically. And you should own them physically because they're hard to get, is basically the conclusion of these episodes for, warp shelving it, is that you should get it on your warp shelf.
Yeah, you can get like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 pretty much anywhere. They've like changed hands a lot. Shout Factory has a really great edition of Army of Darkness that I have. It comes with every cut of the film.
Ooh, that's gorgeous.
It even has the fucking TV edit just for shits. I love it. I love it when they do that. It's so funny.
I gotta say, the season 1 and 2 of these Blu-rays have some nice special features on it, but season 3 was just kind of very like, yeah, we got one feature on it. Fuck you. Okay, we're done now. Like they got other commentaries, but it's very like, all right, like no more special features, and you're like, wait, no, like, please, I would like one, like just a single special feature, but. Yeah, I mean, they're worth owning is basically it. Every bit of this franchise is worth having an actual physical copy of it because it is so convoluted who owns it and where it's going to be next year when you go stream.
Even a couple years ago, like all of Ash vs. Evil Dead was on Netflix, and now it's not on there anymore.
Yep, not on Netflix. It was on Stars for a while, and it's still owned by Stars, but it's on Hulu.
This is what happens. Now. Like, the jumping around gets annoying. Don't even fucking get me started on how many times, like, Doctor Who jumps ship and moves somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. Right? And you're just like, where the fuck was I in this season? Jesus Christ. Like, you're just like, wait a minute. Now, guys, thank you again for listening to this episode. Please, check out our personals, social medias. I am Yep Frank and Yep Gundam everywhere you look.
And I'm Mod Krika pretty much everywhere.
And guys, just make sure you listen to the next episode. We we're not always spooky. We love the spooky stuff. But next up is probably French Connection. Probably French Connection. If we don't talk about some newer movie. We are going back to the AFI Top 100 to keep going. And French Connection was just dropped on HBO Max. I mean, on Max. So, you can go watch it with us if you want to get ready for the episode. And then, we're of course going to cover any new movies that are coming out. And that's, kind of the always thing about this is you're always kind of like, wait a minute. What the fuck are we gonna cover?
If you had a PS5 or anything to play Spider-Man 2 on, I'm sure that would be an episode.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
I was
just
thinking
me.
that too. Yeah, I was thinking that too. And we Killers of the Flower Moon just dropped, so that's the reason why I'm kind of hitting that like maybe thing with us.
I almost saw that last weekend, but like I just missed the boat on it, so we went to go see Bottoms instead.
3.5 hours. Holy fuck.
We missed it. We knew we weren't going to make it to the Coolidge on time, so we watched Bottoms instead, which, by the way, Bottoms, really fucking funny. Really good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. There's also Five Nights at Freddy's and Saw X, but I'm sure we will not be covering either of those. Guys, if you're disappointed in Five Nights at Freddy's, there's already a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. It's called Willy's Wonderland, and it's got Nicolas Cage. You're welcome. That's all I'll say. if you're like, wow, that really sucked. I didn't want to. Why did I spend movie at the theaters? It's on Hulu. Willy's Wonderland. It's the same movie, but Nicolas Cage loved the script so much he bought it and produced it. So he that just shows you kind of like how much he believed in that movie. And you're kind of like, a Five Nights at Freddy's knockoff? He believed in that so hard? Go watch it. You'll see. It's fun.
I mean, you already had me with Nicolas Cage. You had me further with Nicolas Cage and creepy animatronics.
Right. But guys, thank you for listening in, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.